Take a look at the top 20 of Asia. They're all over the place. Okay? That tells you that the information contained in the ranking of Asian universities have some issues buried in there. So we have to be careful. And in fact, this is a different scale. Just for the Chinese universities, it's even worse because you can see the top scale is 350, whereas this top scale is 250. So you can see that there is, as you go from this to this to this, the stability moves away into instability. That's a very, very important part when we discuss this with decision makers. I give you also 6 universities in the ranking. The first one is Harvard University. And all the rankings they put, except for QS, which ranked them number 2, everyone else, so it has 0 width. It is that accurate. And the second one is the National University of Singapore. While, yes, it is, there is some that in the QS is tell you that it's ranked 54 or 50 or something like that, but the Shanghai Jiao Tong is well over 100. So you put that together, you see the width becomes bigger. Actually, for us, the third one is the National Taiwan University. It's very bunched together. So they are around 100 or so. And then the next one is us, NCKU. We're around 200. And you see we're bunched together. So in some sense, I believe that number. Now, the other two, National Tsinghua University and National Jiao Tong University, they're all over the place. Which means that as electrical engineers, our VC is a world-class electrical engineer, no, there's signal-to-noise ratio here, okay? So, for example, the Shanghai National Jiao Tong University could be as high as almost 500 or as low as 180. The information is very, very hard. So we need to be careful about this. So we have to learn how to put them, package them together, and provide these decision makers a good understanding of the meaning of ranking. And the universities should not jump to the gun whenever the ranking tells you that you're doing very well, because the next one may not tell you that you're doing so well. And you might be embarrassed. So reality check. There is confusion. Decision makers need indices to make decisions. Ranking seems to provide indices. Ranking seems to have some amorphous social acceptance. Ranking is here to stay, at least for a while. You have to live with it. Let me jump over this. This is a little too... Here is the structural stability. We always thought that, let's move up. It is not easy to move up. Look at this ranking, that this line is, I think, 2009, and the other one is 2010, which tells you that where it is from one year to the next, there's almost very little movement. So to move this from one position to the next is a hard job. And I think your VC must have told you it is a hard job. It is not going to be easy. And if it's easy, we'll all be California Institute of Technology. So, but there is opportunities there. So we got work to do. Top-ranked universities have reached structural stability. Middle-ranked universities are soft in structural stability. Beyond and large number of papers published in good journals in Asia-Pacific universities are approaching that of the Western universities. Unfortunately, significant discrepancy between the Asia-Pacific universities and top-ranked universities in quality. Because the citation, there's a big discrepancy in citation. One way of judging quality, except Japan, by the way. If later on, if you ask me a question about Japan, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Japanese universities have achieved world standard without abandoning their inherent culture. They are not trying to be... University of Tokyo is not trying to be Berkeley. University of Tokyo is trying to be University of Tokyo. And that is fundamental. And finally, social sciences and humanities, the core of a university's culture, are extremely hard to take into consideration as cultural relevance become more and more pronounced. Now, it's very interesting. All this happened in a mere 4 to 5 decades. You know, in thermodynamics, if any one of you have studied thermodynamics, there's a great concept called non-adiabatic expansion, which means that if you take a piston of air and you move it very quickly, you start generating huge amount of chaos. Well, the growth of Asia Pacific went through precisely such an expansion. It is natural that people are confused and bewildered. They wondered what all this is about while basking in this great life in the 21st century. You know, you're living in this such great life in KL. Flagship universities like Malaysia, such as University of Malaya, must, and I insist, must assist the nation, its people, to figure it out. If not, you're not doing your job. This is what building world-class universities is all about. And if you cannot do that, you're not doing your job. Somebody else should do it. So let's go back to my 4 challenges. It's education integrity. As a physicist, I always ask, how do I define these terms? What is education? Well, it's holistic. It's elementary schools, it's middle schools, universities, it's family, it's academic, it's intellectual, it's education principles, institutional management, and more and more and more. Deficiencies in any of the above would constitute violation of integrity. And this is important. So the impact on integrity on education is the same as air to human and water to fish. Without integrity, successful meeting the other 3 challenges would mean nothing. So I will not discuss that today because you all know what integrity is. And if you don't, it's too late for you. So please allow me to leverage 3 pieces of history I learned in the past 3.5 years to illustrate the 3 challenges I mentioned. I must say in the last 3.5 years, I climbed probably the steepest learning curve in my life. You know, prior to coming to Taiwan, since 1980, I've been to Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, at least 150 times in about 30 years. But as we Chinese would say, every time I come, I would 吃喝玩乐, I eat, drink, play, and have fun. That, unfortunately, does not give me the inside scoop of how Asian operates. What is the Asian culture? And I find that's what I learned in the last 3.5 years, and I'd like to share that with you. Now, of course, what I learned is based on my experience in Taiwan. But I think some of the things I learned, the concept at least, is generic. That generic, I hope, would help you to think through some of these issues as you go on. Academic agility. This is a very interesting issue. Now, let me give you a history, the story here. I'm telling you a very interesting story. In 1997, I attended the National Academy of Engineering conference in Washington, D.C. And the keynote speaker at that time was Phil Condit, who was the CEO of Boeing. And the very first statement he said during that day, by the way, there were at least about 1,500 to 2,000 people attending this talk. And he said, Bill Boeing, Mr. Boeing, not the company, Mr. Boeing, hired in 1916 Zhu Wang as the company's first aeronautical engineer, blah, 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 blah. I was quite fascinated by that statement, but he was immediately surrounded by lots and lots of people probably wanting money from him. So I never got the chance to really follow that up. So in 1997, it began to fade into my psyche. Now, there's an old Chinese saying called 打破铁鞋无觅处，得来全不费功夫, which means that you can wear your iron shoes and all over the world until the shoe's broken and you cannot find it, and yet suddenly you found it without any effort. Well, that happened to me. Because when I arrived at National Cheng Kung University, the Department of Mechanical Engineer chair said, "Would you like to see our history gallery?" I said, "Sure." So some young lady was taking me this beautiful gallery, and so this is so-and-so. I've never heard of the guy, so in 1 year and out 1 year. This is so-and-so, never heard of him. This is the first engineer from Boeing. And she was going to go on. And suddenly at that moment, I connected with my 1997 experience. I said, hold on. Don't go so fast. Let me know a little bit more about this. And she knew nothing about it. She said, that's all I know. So I spent the last year, and after that I spent a year working with many, many different faculties. And I found this man of enormous interest. He was born in 1893 in Peking. In 1909, 2 years before the downfall of the Qing dynasty, the last dynasty of China, he was sent to the United Kingdom. And in 1915, he graduated from Durham University with mechanical engineering. Some of you probably came from Durham University. And the same year, he had MIT's aeronautical engineering. Then in 1916, he graduated at MIT. By the way, it's very interesting. When he graduated, MIT only had master's degree at that time. There were 7 graduates in MIT at that time in aeronautical engineering. 5 were Chinese. Same year, hired by Mr. Bill Boeing to be his company's first chief engineer. In 17, he returned to China and built a very robust Chinese aeronautical program. And between 55 and 65, he taught at NCKU. I couldn't believe this. And during his time in China, he had many, many students. This one, if you're from mainland China, you will know him, the gentleman on this side. His name is Qian Xuesen. He was regarded, because he just passed away, as father of China's rocket program. The entire China's program of today was basically due to this man. And in 1955 to 65, he taught at our university. So this conjured up lots of interesting questions in my head. The first one is, wait a minute. Why would MIT in 1916 have a full academic program in aeronautical engineering? The reason is, why am I asking that question? Look at what aeroplanes looked like in 1903. It's a piece of junk by the Wright brothers. And yet, 10 years later, MIT, without the foresight, because they don't have it, whether this could even be a business venture, MIT built a complete aeronautical engineering program. This, to me, is academic agility. And Asian universities today must build academic agility in order to be world-class. Can we do it immediately? Probably not. But we must bear that in mind. We must put that in our heads and move in that direction. Another very remarkable thing, Mr. Bill Boeing, this guy, he knew nothing about technology. He was a businessman. He made his money by selling wood to San Francisco after the Great Fire of San Francisco in the early 1900s. Think, in the early 20th century, Asians were almost at best second-class citizens in the United States. But this guy was able to develop a company's business culture which value intellect and not skin color. This establishes the success foundation of Boeing as a company. And we too must teach our new generation of Asians the concept of value intellect and not skin color. Now the issue on intellectual courage. The question I ask is, why did Wang study aeronautical engineering at MIT? Well, it's very interesting. It's a lot harder to answer this question. So let me launch into a discussion here. We all know that before the Renaissance, global centers of technologies lie in East Asia, especially China, and the Arab world. Why? Well, I'll give you one example. There are many, many examples. In 1054, the first observed supernova explosions called the Crab Nebula. For some of you who know anything about astronomy, you would know about the Crab Nebula. Now, it's interesting, 1054, that's only about 30 years before Oxford was created. This event, which was observable during daytime for 3 months, has no record anywhere in the West except in Chinese and Arab world. You know, I was told that it might have something to do with the strong Catholic issues in Western Europe in those days, where they believed the earth is centered. And so I would assume that these people go out and see it and say, "Did you see it?" "No, I didn't." So there was no record of it. Zero. But the Chinese or the Arabs were able to record it. Now, when you record this, what have you done? You have done the first thing you learn in scientific methodology. Observe and record what you observe accurately. You know all the scientific integrity issues that has occurred recently in many, many people. When they violate integrity, they invent data and so on. That's when they violate scientific methodology. But by the time the Renaissance came along, you notice there were all these fantastic people just came up. Francis Bacon, René Descartes, Nicholas Copernicus, Da Vinci, Martin Luther, and so on and so forth. So by the 19th century, Europe became the global center of the intellectual excellence. And you can see that the 19th century, early 18th, 19th century, all these great mathematicians, Legendre, Cauchy, Dirichlet, Louisville, Weierstrass, Stokes, you name it, they all came out of that era. And the list goes on. Lie as in Lie algebras, and so on. However, it is my personal opinion that the greatest scientific discovery of the 19th century is the work of James Clerk Maxwell, whose development of the Maxwell equations, which the VC probably can recite it with his eyes closed, to explain in totality the elusive phenomena of electromagnetic radiation. That stunned the world. Maxwell equations give a complete understanding of the electromagnetic radiation. But it is not just Maxwell. There are other people, such as music and art and so on. My mother, who is a musician, always taught me the importance. She loved Chopin's music. And if you look at these two guys, they live almost in the same time. And that's why I put these two together. Maxwell equations with the Chopin Nocturne. And I always tell students, you have to understand that both of these are the intellectual achievement of the highest order of human that can do. And that's why they should stand side by side of one another. However, in 1 year between 1643 and 1644, the Almighty, whoever Almighty is, played a big joke on China. What joke was that? Well, the great Qing dynasty, you all know, is between 1644 to 1911. 1644 is the first year of the reign of the Emperor Shunzi. 1643, the Almighty gave the Western world Newton. So, a year later, they gave us this emperor in Qing dynasty. A year before, they gave him Newton. That's unfair. Outstanding 19th century European universities propelled profound intellectual and technological developments and gave the young people in Europe then a platform for them to build what? Build inherent self-confidence. And therefore, it's a very long-winded way of saying this, It is natural.